Lighting looks fine. Those shadows are fine. All right. So you can look at the camera. You can look at me. You can look wherever you want. If you're talking, if you see bring something up, you can talk to him. It's whatever, really. Whatever makes you comfortable. So if I could just have your name and then your occupation and like what you do.
Thank you, Jordan. My name is Dr. Jim Paul. I'm retired from Kankakee Community College, where I taught for 34 years full-time as a history and philosophy professor. Taught a few more years part-time, and in the 1980s I became involved with the Bourbonnais Grove Historical Society as a board member, and then eventually became an officer. I think I was a secretary for a while, and in 2016 was elected president of the Bourbonnais Grove Historical Society.
Okay. What I guess brought you to teaching history? Was it always like you just enjoyed history, classes when you're younger, or you just like found that to be like I enjoy teaching this?
Well, I have a career that's gone in different directions. And after graduation from the 8th grade, I joined seminary. I was going to be a priest. And so for high school and college, I attended St. Meinrad Seminary in southern Indiana. But then I decided I wasn't going to do that. In 1968, I left the seminary after I graduated from college with a degree in history. And then I eventually went to Southern Illinois University and acquired a Master of Arts degree in Latin American history. I found a job in Kankakee, Illinois in 1970 as an insurance adjuster. So I'd gone from a seminarian to be a priest to an insurance adjuster with a Master of Arts degree, but I hadn't finished the thesis required for graduating with the Master of Arts degree. So I had left SIU in 1970 with all the coursework finished, but not the degree. So it took me 2 more years living in Kankakee area as an insurance adjuster, 1970 to 72, to complete that thesis. And once I did, I had the Master of Arts degree, applied for a position at Kankakee Community College, and I got it.
So you jumped around a little bit, but eventually you settled, and I'm assuming you enjoyed doing that for a while, before retiring. You said philosophy a little bit. How did that tie in with the history aspect?
Very well. As a matter of fact, in the 1980s, I received my Doctor of Arts degree at Illinois State University in intellectual history, or the history of ideas, where you bridge history and philosophy. And so in 1976, I was asked if I would teach philosophy at KCC because it was in the college course catalog, but no one had ever taught it. And I thought, oh boy, I had minored in philosophy in the seminary, but I hadn't really learned it as well as I wanted to. But now I did. And I started teaching Introduction to Philosophy in 1976. And in 1980, I began teaching Death and Dying as a philosophy course. And I taught those until I retired in 2006 full-time. And then I taught them for another 3 years part-time until 2009.
So now you are the president of the Historical Society, though, right?
Yes.
What does that job entail?
It's like an executive director position in any organization. Pretty much in charge of organizing the meetings, moving things along, an agenda, keeping the members engaged, increasing membership. The Bourbonnais Grove Historical Society dates back to 1975, when the village of Bourbonnais had its centennial, and Adrian M. Richard, a local accountant, with a few others, organized the organization. And as a matter of fact, the person who asked for a $5 due payment was an Olivet professor. And he put $5 down on the table and said we should start paying at least $5 dues. And so from that time on, we had dues. Our dues are still nominal to this day. But it's been a community-wide organization. Although our mission is to preserve the history of Bourbonnais and the French-Canadian heritage in the area, that doesn't mean that just French Canadians belong to the Historical Society, because I have limited French ethnicity in my background, and that's the way it is with many of our members. And so we are open to the whole community of Kankakee River Valley, really.
It's really just so everyone can like learn, and just the community can come together and like experience learn about the history of where they're living, basically.
Exactly, that's exactly right.
So now that we've gotten the logistics out of the way, could you just go over like just general overview, I guess as quick as you could, from the beginning of Bourbonnais to present day? How did this town form? How is there like three towns next to each other? How does this all come to be?
So we can go back to the time of the Potawatomi, and when Illinois became a state in 1818, the northeastern part was virtually vacant of any white population, no white settlers. The Native Americans were here. And eventually, in the 1820s, some fur traders moved into the area. Two brothers, Antoine and Francois Bourbonnais Sr. And they came down the Kankakee River from up north, and they came through this area. And then about the same time, Noel Levasseur, whose picture is behind me, although it's a little bit later than the 1820s, he died in 1879. He was coming through in the 1820s as well, and went down from the Kankakee River to the Iroquois River. And there, a trading post was set up in the mid-1820s with Gurdon Hubbard, and that was called Buncombe, where the town of Iroquois, Illinois is today. Eventually, Noel Levasseur and his Potawatomi wife, Wachiki, and two of his associates, Dominic Bray and Henri Boucher, came to La Pointe, which is an area from the Kankakee River that comes to a point where the Dairy Queen is, more or less, today. And at that point, there was a little road, and it was on its way to Chicago, and they decided that was a good place to set up a trading post. That was 1834. Francois Bourbonnais Sr. and his Potawatomi wife, Catiche, and his children, they and his brother, they all left for Western Illinois a couple of years before. So their house was vacant. So Noel Levasseur and Wachiki are here with the two others. And in 1835, Quaker family that originally was from Virginia, that had moved to East Tennessee, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, moved into Bourbonnais Grove. That was also 1834. And in 1835, they built a log cabin. Today we call that whole area Perry Farm Park. Back then it was called Twin Oaks. And Thomas Durham and Margaret Durham, when they moved here in the covered wagon, in 1835 they had 9 children. So we have the Quaker Durhams on the south part of this area that was called La Pointe, but now being called Bourbonnais Grove after the Bourbonnais brothers, although they had left. And that grove of trees went from, there was a 12-mile stretch of trees along the Kankakee River from Kankakee, what is today Kankakee River State Park, to Cobb Park in Kankakee. So they settled there, the Durhams, the Levasseurs, the Boucher, the Brays, and then a few other families began coming in. But there wasn't a great influx of population until the 1840s, and I'll talk about that. I just want you to be aware there was no Bradley until the 1880s. There was no Kankakee until the 1850s when the railroad came through, actually 1853. So Bourbonnais Grove was the settlement in the area at first.
So that was the first town. Okay, That's good to know because it's always like there's three here. Which one came first?
That's
So,
right.
so I guess moving on to into like the later 1800s, the 1900s. How did the town progress
Well,
as it grew?
Noah Levasseur, in 1837, went back to his home in Quebec province to recruit more French Canadians to come down here because he loved this area. And so he was successful. By the 1840s, mid 1840s, several hundred French Canadian families had come here from Quebec province and other parts of Canada because they were controlled by the British. They were Catholic, they weren't Protestant. They had agricultural problems in Canada. They had political problems, economic problems, social problems, and so many of them were desperate for a new way of life. Half, I would say, went to the east coast of the United States, where they began working in the cotton mills. And maybe another half, I'm not sure of the numbers, came to the Midwest and Bourbonnais Grove because of the agricultural opportunities. That was the mid 1840s. And so imagine a lot of immigrants coming into the area in the mid 1840s. And also there were other non-French Canadians coming also, but Bourbonnais Grove was predominantly French Canadian by the mid 1840s.
Okay, I was about to ask, was there like another influx? Because I know America as a whole, we had our first wave of immigration and the second wave. Did Bourbonnais see something similar?
Not until later,
Okay.
not until the 20th century. Today, Bourbonnais is multi-ethnic. I mean, you can see that there are Germans, Italians, Scandinavians, Filipinos, Vietnamese, Hispanics. It's a multicultural area today.
Mm-hmm. It's great. I think that's an emblem of like a lot of America now. It's like combining all our cultures together in like in a great way that we can cohesively live together. But moving ahead a little bit to like the 1800s with the railroads, you said that's how all these other towns like Kankakee started to pop up. How did the railroads and I guess the Industrial Revolution like amplify Bourbonnais? How did it help the town progress?
It didn't. No, Bourbonnais remained the same because it was off the railroad track. Kankakee was built up after 1853. Manteno, Chavance, any place along the Illinois Central. Bourbonnais wasn't. It was the original settlement, but it could benefit from the railroad because of the opportunities of commerce, getting things to market, and so there was benefits both way between the railroads and the population of Bourbonnais Grove. Bourbonnais Grove was not just agricultural. There were hard good, dry goods stores, opportunities for people, and there was a college, and St. Viator College developed in 1874, right before this Bourbonnais Grove became incorporated as the village of Bourbonnais. And the Viatorians were very predominant in the area, as well as the congregation of the Sisters of Notre Dame, who helped educate the girls. The Viatorian order, the brothers and priests, helped educate the boys. Well, part of that education extended beyond grade school and high school into a college. And so in 1874, they received a university charter for St. Viator College. And in 1938-39, they went bankrupt during the Depression, and the campus was purchased by Olivet Nazarene College at that point. During that time, when education was so much of value, there had been a Bourbonnais log schoolhouse, which is on our museum campus. We're in the Laterno home today, but the museum, log schoolhouse is just next door. That dates from 1837 to 48. So 1837 is a pretty good marker for things really getting going. That's when Noah Levasseur went to Quebec to begin his recruitment. That's when a couple of homes were built, and the log schoolhouse. The other home, besides the Laterno home, which we call it, I'll tell you why it's called the Laterno home in a minute, but Levasseur's own home was also built in 1837, a brick home. George Laterno is a prominent individual in this area, and I can talk about him if you want me to know.
Yeah, of course. I was about to ask about the house we're in right now. If you could talk a little bit about it, the family that lived here, the man who brought it up, and then also relocating the house because it was moved from its original spot.
Mm-hmm.
And you can also talk about the schoolhouse and putting that back together.
Sure. In 1831, George Letourneau was born in Quebec Province, and he, because of the reasons I mentioned earlier, left at the age of 16. As a matter of fact, his father was involved in the patriotic rebellion of the French Canadians against the British, and they didn't do very well, the French Canadians. Their home was ransacked and looted. George, I'm sure, was very impressed by that in a negative way. So anyway, he left home at the age of 16. And he lived in Chicago for a few months after traversing the Great Lakes to get to Chicago. Chicago was up and coming, well, not quite booming yet, but it began its incorporation as a city, as a major city in 1837 also. So he was there for a few months before he came to Bourbonnais Grove, either on horseback or walking. He walked the 56 miles of road to horse down here. Began working various jobs. La Petite Canada is out where the Kankakee River State Park is located today, and there was a major French community there, as well as in Bourbonnais Grove, right where we are. He eventually, a couple of years later, in 1850, went off to California to make his fortune in whatever, because of the gold rush. He actually made money in supplying miners in the gold mines and the quartz mines, and he came back with income, and he married his sweetheart, childhood sweetheart actually, from Quebec Province. She had given him a lock of her hair, and when he left at the age of 16, she asked him not to forget her, and he didn't. So her family moved here also in 1847. Letourneau came here in 1847 too. So they're both here about the same time. And when he came back from California, he proposed, and they were married in 1852. And he bought a pioneer structure, which was about a quarter of a mile away from where we're located. And they moved in there, and it became the farmhouse for their farm. And they moved in 1854. They had 11 children. And we're in that